Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 22 team selection where I've got 2 free transfers, 1.5 million in the bank, and it's time to start planning ahead. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So despite the fact that I have a big smile on my face, my rank is sadly nothing to be smiling about right now. I am now on my 4th red arrow in a row, but I'm always going to be smiling. I love what I do with this YouTube channel. I feel so grateful that so many of you watch my content. I'm never going to arrive for a video looking sad and miserable, so I smile through the pain, but this is FPL, and it's not a game that you should play if you're not willing to accept that there are going to be some bad weeks, and we've had 4 bad weeks in a row, but very luckily, they've not been big red arrows, and I can take small red arrows. So in the 4 weeks where we've had 4 consecutive reds, I've only fallen about 100,000 places. Now, of course, I'm going in the completely wrong direction, and it's even more frustrating because in those 4 weeks, I'm happy with most of my decisions and my team's looked okay. It's just been the case that a few 50-50s have gone wrong. I've not really nailed captaincy, as we'll discuss. A few benching decisions not right. But also, there are so many good assets, it seems, in FPL at the moment that you can't own everyone. And quite often, those highly owned assets are doing really, really well. And if there was one man to further cement the red arrow for me, I'm delighted that it was Amad Diallo. As a Manchester United fan, for him to get that hat-trick, it was a wonderful moment. But yeah, that further cemented it. So 67 points for me. I'm recording this before they've fully confirmed the bonus points, but it looks like it'll be 67 points, which is a small red arrow from 274k to 293k. So still top 300k. We need to start getting some green arrows though. In terms of this game week, the defense was a little bit disappointing once again. Sanchez concedes once again, and I will sit here every week and say, actually, Chelsea's defensive data is not that bad, but they do just seem to concede. It's a bit like Fulham, really. Fulham's defensive data is even better than Chelsea's, but they just find ways to concede some teams, and Sanchez and Chelsea feel a little bit like that right now. Obviously, they're getting Chalobah back. Maybe that'll improve them slightly. I'm still okay with having him, but yeah, 1 pointer wasn't fantastic. Munoz getting a clean sheet and no attacking return. We don't own Munoz for the clean sheets. What's this about? Honestly, shouldn't have had a clean sheet. Leicester should have scored in that game. So I feel quite fortunate that I did pick up the clean sheet there. He was pretty attacking as he always is. And I just feel with Munoz, that monster haul is coming. There is a 15-pointer locked and loaded very, very soon. I mean, Gahey's the one that got the 15 points, but I feel like one's coming very, very soon for Munoz. So nice to get the clean sheet. And then Gabriel and Trent, again, not really pulling their weight. And it's more frustrating because the likes of Robinson on my bench, Lewis Hall, Munoz, they're picking up points right now. And I'm sat there with 2 of the most expensive defenders in the game, failing to deliver. I suppose in hindsight, and maybe not even in hindsight, a lot of you said I would start Robinson ahead of Gabriel. Maybe that was the right decision, but Gabriel was very close to picking up a goal/assist that FPL decided not to give, then they gave it, then they took it away. I'm not commenting on whether I think it should have been an assist. I don't really care at the end of the day. It would have been an extra few points, but I think Gabriel is always in the right positions to score goals for Arsenal, and I still back the decision made there. But yeah, Trent with another sort of low score didn't really do a massive amount in that game either, so really disappointing. We're not going to sell Trent, obviously, as Ipswich at home and a double game week coming up, but a little bit disappointing to get 3 points from the pair of them. And like I said, because Robinson's 7 pointers sat there on the bench, it's even worse. Just very briefly on Robinson, this is going to sound extremely salty, I'm aware of that. If you've not watched the Fulham highlights, go and watch the Fulham highlights. Robinson's 2 assists and Iwobi's 2 goals. Robinson for both goals passed the ball sideways to Iwobi, and then Iwobi crossed the ball. For both, they were definite crosses. No one got on the end of either cross, and they sort of just trickled into the net. It was the most ridiculous pair. They were almost like identical goals, and neither of them were shots from Iwobi, and neither of them were particularly good assists from Anthony Robinson. But still, the man is an absolute creative machine, and he will continue to deliver, and I'm very glad to at least own him. The attack's really interesting, right? Because every player returned, apart from Fernandes and Salah, and even Fernandes, at the time of me recording, is on 2 bonus points. So, the attack actually did really well. I just happened to captain my lowest scoring attacker, which was Mohamed Salah, which isn't something you normally expect. Now, there was a lot of people suggesting that because of how good Forest are defensively, you don't captain him. And I will accept that. I also sort of semi-agreed that, listen, Forest are very good. Maybe you look elsewhere. But with the flag on Isak, I didn't know whether he was definitely going to start, how many minutes he would get. Obviously, he goes on and gets a 16-pointer. And I think Bournemouth have been pretty good this season defensively as well. Obviously, Palmer had a lot of chances in that game, but so did Salah after about the 75th minute. He had at least 2 or 3 chances. He had a goal cleared off the line by Ola Aina. There was an incredible save by Sells, 1 or 2 heavy touches. I'm not saying Salah should have come away with like 20 points, but he was very close and in the right positions towards the end of the game. So listen, you're not going to get captaincy right every week, as per other decisions. If I'd have captained Palmer or Isak, I'm coming away with a small green arrow probably. So it's just one of those things. Again, you're not going to get captaincy right all the time. But yeah, maybe in the future we don't back against Nottingham Forest defence, and maybe that's a very obvious point to make. On Palmer, I thought he was actually really good in this game. I feel like Chelsea looked a little bit better, sort of not back to their best as such, because they're still a little bit off it. But there were some signs that they were starting to tick, and Palmer had a very good game in particular. Rodgers picking up an assist was absolutely lovely, and the clean sheet point, of course. Fernandes, a little bit underwhelming. Manchester United were awful for most of that game, in all honesty, apart from the final 20 minutes when Xerxes came onto the pitch. But at the moment, like I said, he's holding 2 bonus points, which just shows the lack of quality in that game. I wanted to finish with the front 3 because this is the only positive I can really bring from my team right now. This front 3 is amazing for me. Like I love them. I love what they bring. They've each got something slightly different, but also the consistency that I'm getting. Across the last 2 weeks, they've all returned in both of their games. I think it's a combined 8 attacking returns in 2 game weeks from Mateta, Wood and Isak. So, really, Mateta and Wood saved me. Isak's not getting me anything because everyone owns him anyway, but Mateta and Wood's points this week was the difference between a small red arrow and what would have been a massive one, and I was not expecting anything from Chris Wood. I wasn't watching the Liverpool game for the first 10 minutes. I just flicked onto SofaScore to check the results, and I just saw that Chris Wood had scored in the 8th minute, and what a goal that was. He took it so incredibly well. Lovely to get another goal from Mateta as well. So yeah, that's 2 goals in 2 now for Mateta and Chris Wood. Listen, I don't think the team looks that bad. There are definitely some questionable things in there. Maybe I shouldn't have captained Salah. Maybe I should have started Robinson. But it was just one of those weeks where a lot of the other highly owned assets did extremely well. Like Gordon smashed it. Hall kept the clean sheet. Ahmad's 20-pointer. You can't have them all. So that was Game Week 21, 67 points. Let me know in the comments how many points you got for Game Week 21. Let's now take a look at 22. So moving very swiftly on to Game Week 22, I've currently got 1.5 million in the bank and 2 free transfers. And if we're focusing on the positives, which is the name of the game today, team value is actually going up quite nicely. So I'm currently on 105.6 if you have my team value and my in the bank. I know selling value is more important than team value, but we're not going to get into that today. Just to say that people are clearly buying players that I already own, which is a nice position to be in. I think it's Praz, the wonderful Praz of the FPL, always says that he decides if his team is in a good position if people are buying the players that he already owns. And a lot of the players that I own seem to be going up in price. So I think the team's in an okay place, but as always, I will ask for your feedback down below. If there's anything that you think I should start to do with my team, and especially around the benching decisions this week, I would love your feedback in the comments. The team is currently rated at 97% according to Fantasy Football Hub and projected to get 69.3 points. If you want to look at your own projected points, your team rating, Opta statistics, player comparison tools, fixture analyzer, planning ahead, all of that wonderful stuff, I will leave a link down below to Fantasy Football Hub where you can get 30% off at the moment. And as always, let's start with the goalkeepers. So Sanchez and Fabianski both playing at home. Wolves at home for Sanchez, Crystal Palace at home for Fabianski. I will be starting Sanchez this week because I still maintain that Chelsea are the better defence. And in terms of fixtures, I think they're probably quite comparable, but I obviously own a Crystal Palace attacker and I don't own a Wolves attacker. So I think the right situation for me is to start Sanchez. Interestingly, obviously Potter has come in as the new manager for West Ham and Fabianski still appears to be the number one. I'm very happy to see that because whilst I thought that would probably be the case, you just never know when a manager comes in. They might just start the other goalkeeper. We've seen that quite a few times. So at the moment, if Fabianski can keep his place, that's great because there are some upcoming game weeks where I would like to play Fabianski over Sanchez. One of them was actually in Game Week 27. So in Game Week 27, Sanchez has Southampton at home. Fabianski in that week, I think has, Leicester at home. That's so useful because if I do decide to keep, I might not keep Sanchez that long, by the way, but if I do decide to keep Sanchez until Game Week 27 or beyond, because it's a midweek game, I'm almost certain that Jorgensen starts that. And it's Southampton at home, which is really frustrating. But in that week, if I can play Fabianski, then obviously that's really useful. So nothing much more to say on the goalkeepers other than I'm just going to continue starting Sanchez most weeks unless there's a fixture I really like for Fabianski. And actually, I still am really happy with the defensive setup. At some point, if Gabriel and Trent don't start delivering more clean sheets and attacking returns, there will be a question about downgrading them. But as you can see with both of them, I know it's quite small underneath them, but after the Villa and Brentford games for Gabriel and Trent respectively, Gabriel's got 3 good fixtures in the next 4 against Wolves, Leicester and West Ham. Trent's obviously got Ipswich at home, then the double, then Wolves at home. So they've both got some much better fixtures coming up. So I feel like if I'm held them through these slightly trickier ones, I'd be very surprised if I sell Gabriel or Trent for the next, I'd say 4 or 5 game weeks. But beyond that, if they don't impress in that time, I will absolutely look to move them on. Because the likes of Lewis Hall, even Castagna, I could double up. There are a lot of decent, cheap Nottingham Forest defence who I continue to ignore despite the clean sheets. They're all performing at a really decent level. So there are definitely some other cheap defenders that I could look to bring in. I then still really like the pairing of Robinson and Munoz. Robinson's fixtures do start to run out a little bit after the Leicester game. It's 3 home games in 4 after Leicester. But from a clean sheet perspective, United, Newcastle, Forest, Crystal Palace, I'm not sure how many clean sheets I expect necessarily. Even for the attacking threat that he has, you're probably not expecting a mass amount of assist in those games. So if I was to sell one of them soon, which I'm not planning on doing, but let's say I desperately wanted Lewis Hall, or I needed to free up some funds, or I want to go out there and get a Forest defender, it probably would be Robinson ahead of Munoz, because Munoz's fixtures now are good until about game week 30. I will just note, and we'll talk about this more in the coming weeks, if Spurs reach the EFL Cup final, because they play against Fulham in game week 29, there is a small chance that the double for Fulham and Spurs falls in game week 25 as opposed to 33. We would have that announced post game week 23, so it will be a little while till we find out, a couple of game weeks. But that's a possible reason that you might just want to hang on to your Spurs and Fulham assets a little bit longer. Obviously, if Spurs don't reach the final and it's Liverpool, then they're just playing game week 29. But it's another reason why I'm eager to just hold Robinson for a bit longer. And obviously, Leicester this week is also a good fixture. I do not like at all benching Munoz, though. And as of right now, I've got a few options. I just start Munoz ahead of Robinson because I probably expect both of them to concede, but Munoz has got greater goal threat, Robinson's got greater assist threat. So I start Munoz ahead of Robinson. I don't love that, though, because I think it's a better fixture for Robinson. He's very creative, and I think Fulham are a better defence than Palace. So I actually, as you can see here, have Robinson slightly higher into the pecking order. The other option is, do I start Munoz ahead of Gabriel or Trent? I'm probably not going to bench Trent, so it would be Munoz ahead of Gabriel. I like that probably slightly more than ahead of Robinson, which is crazy to say, but again, I'm just so terrified of that Gabriel bullet header. And Arsenal, for everything they're struggling with from an attacking perspective, I still feel like the numbers are pretty decent defensively, and I still feel like they are a decent defence. Like, to limit Spurs to only 1 goal is pretty decent. They're not conceding a ton of chances. So I don't love that. And then the third and final option is to play a 4 at the back. And when we move on to my attackers, there'll be one player that everyone's like, yeah, just bench that attacker. I've just got a weird feeling about that attacker, as I'll discuss later. It's more of a gut feeling. So I feel like I should try and follow that gut feeling wherever possible. So as of right now, Munoz is on the bench. I hate it, but it might have to be the way that I go. I'd love to know what you think, again, around my benching decisions down below in the comments. That's the defence. Absolutely no transfers planned for now. Let's move on to the midfield. So moving on to the midfield 4 this week, which could become a midfield 3 if I play Munoz, and a lot of people would suggest that because I'm currently starting Enzo Fernandez, and I'll be honest, he has been really disappointing across the last 5 weeks or so. I think since owning him, all I've picked up from him is 1 single assist. Obviously, I've not started him every single week, but you do want more, even at the cheaper price. And I do have to keep on reinforcing, you can't expect too much from assets that are around 5 million in the attack, but even so, you want a little bit more from him, especially when Ahmad's gone and delivered a 20-pointer. Even Semenyo's been picking up points recently as well. You kind of do need a little bit more. I am wary, though, of moving around these cheap assets, because people have been recently going from this player to that player, selling Rodgers for Ahmad, and then selling Ahmad for this person. And these cheap assets, they're not going to return every week, but they all have very high potential, which is why we own them. Each of them can go out there and get a goal and an assist, or in Ahmad's case, 3 goals. So do I think Enzo is a top 3 cheap asset to own? No, I'd rather own Ahmad. I'd rather own Murphy. I'd rather own probably Ismail Assar. But do I think it's worth a transfer right now? I probably don't. And the reason for that is if I decide, I just don't think he's a good asset, I've got Munoz sat on the bench this week who I'd very much like to have. So I feel like if I decide I'm not believing in Enzo, then maybe I just play Munoz. I don't know why. I just feel good about Enzo this week. And these things happen in FPL. You just have a good feeling about a player for no good reason. The other thing that I like is he plays on Monday night. It's always nice to have players on Monday night. And I'm not suggesting you base your decisions all around when teams play. But it's just nice, having a little bit more action on the final game. And if you're in a red arrow going into Monday, but you've got Enzo in the team, you're like, hey, maybe my boy can get something. So I don't think he's a fantastic asset. I'm not expecting a hat-trick like Ahmad got this week, but could he get something? Absolutely. If I'm looking at this objectively, I think it's very, 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 very close between kind of who do I bench out of Robinson, Gabriel, Enzo, and Munoz. Obviously, one of them's got to be on the bench. I think Enzo being on set pieces is a massive advantage. I think Enzo's minutes are good. I like the fact that he's playing at home. And I just think this is maybe a bit of fallacious thing. Maybe this isn't the way you should think, but I just want, if my player's closer to goal, I feel like they're likely to do better. And Enzo is an attacker. Now, Munoz gets very far forward, but I just like the fact that Enzo is playing as virtually a 10. Obviously, Lavia being back is an advantage. We saw in this game, though, just because Lavia is back doesn't mean that Enzo suddenly starts scoring goals again. He still needs to get into those positions. But with Enzo and Caicedo as the holding midfielders, it does give Enzo a little bit more license to get forward. All of that to say, I might end up benching him, but I would love to know down below who you would bench out of Gabriel, Robinson, Enzo, and Munoz. Maybe Gabriel is the shout. I don't have a particularly great feeling about him, but it's just that bullet header is just always there waiting. And because they're so good defensively, it would kill me if I benched a 15-pointer from Gabriel. So there's something to think about. The other three midfielders I'm all pretty happy with. So at the moment, Salah's got the armband. This feels very similar to last week where I'm like, oh, I'll think about it closer to the time. But I think this is obviously a much better fixture. Brentford are a weaker defence than Wolves. They're a weaker defence than Brighton. They're a weaker defence than Bournemouth. The other teams that my premium players are playing against, I would say he's probably got the best fixture of the bunch, although Wolves at home for Palmer is very, very tempting. It is between Palmer and Salah once again. And once again, I'm sure I'll get this one wrong. But as of right now, I think Liverpool are a little bit more consistent and Brentford are a slightly weaker defence than Wolves. So I think I'm just about leaning towards Mohamed Salah as well as the other questions I've asked you. Let me know in the comments who you're looking to captain for Game Week 22. But yeah, Salah's currently getting the nod just about. I think, is the Wolves game where Palmer got, I'm just looking on the FPL site now, it was like Game Week 2, wasn't it? Yeah, Game Week 2 and he got a 17-pointer. 1 goal and 3 assists. They beat Wolves 6-2. I remember that game. It was when Madueke got the hat-trick, I think, and Palmer gave him 3 identical assists. It was a bad performance from Wolves. Under Vitor Pereira, Wolves are like top 6 for expected goals conceded. Across the season, they're sort of mid-table. I don't think Wolves are the pushovers that they were under Gary O'Neill at points this season. So I'm not saying this is a bad fixture. We've just seen that Isak got a 16-pointer against Wolves, so it's possible. But yeah, I think I'm leaning Salah. We'll discuss it more closer to the deadline, but let me know what you're thinking on that one. And then Bruno Fernandes, very disappointing against Southampton. Man United were. Again, before that Ahmad hat-trick, it was not looking good for Manchester United. If Man United continue like this, I will not hesitate to sell Bruno Fernandes. I'll go and get a Brian Mbeumo or someone very similar like that. Even an Eberechi Eze, or just there are so many good assets for cheaper than Fernandes that will offer the potential for points. Even just downgrading him to Ahmad at some point if I need the funds. So I am not going to be a stubborn manager with Bruno. But as of right now, with Brighton at home this week, a couple of other decent fixtures coming up, I just don't feel the desperate need to sell him. But I will have that possibility coming up very, very soon. The only other midfielder is obviously Rodgers on the bench. It's the perfect fixture to bench him against Arsenal. And I like the fact that I've got a benching headache even outside of that. So I've got enough cover to deal with that. After the Arsenal game, he's got 3 fantastic fixtures in a row. So Rodgers will absolutely be starting for the West Ham, Wolves and Ipswich games after the Arsenal one, which means that for Enzo Fernandez, he's probably just going to sit on my bench now unless I sell him for the foreseeable future after this. So it's almost like one last hurrah for me in my team. So yeah, that's how the midfield stands right now. In terms of where I want to go and players that I want to bring in, obviously the Liverpool midfielders outside of Salah are interesting for the double. I do really want to own Brian Mbeumo in the near future if I can. And also Anthony Gordon continues to batter my rank. But the fixtures are starting to run out a little bit for Newcastle. I feel like I've slightly missed the boat on Gordon. If I wanted Gordon, it was 2 weeks ago. I've missed the points. I've missed the slightly better fixtures. And now it feels a little bit like chasing points. But obviously, if Newcastle continue like this, maybe it's not. So that's midfield. Let's move on to the 3 forwards and then take a look at my watch list. So moving on to the front 3, and again, I'm absolutely delighted with where the front 3 currently is. And when I look at the fixtures over the next 3 or 4 game weeks, I think I'll be happy with this front 3 for the foreseeable future, even if they do pick up a couple of blanks. I was thinking, what do I love about this front 3 so much? So I keep looking at it, I'm just really happy with it. Obviously, 3, we think penalty takers. Gibbs White could take a penalty for Forest. Eze could take a penalty for Crystal Palace. But 3 first-choice penalty takers with good fixtures, good minutes. And what I like about them is that they're all forwards. They're all proper number 9s. You know, like when you watch João Pedro and he's dropped over to the left wing, or like left wing back, sometimes you watch João Pedro and you're like, what are you doing there? And even like Mateus Cunha at points, he's like dropping between the centre-backs to pick up the ball. Wood, Isak and Mateta are proper 9s, and especially Wood and Mateta, they just get goals. They ghost for the entire rest of the game. They do very little, and sometimes when you watch them, you're like, why do I own this player? And then they just pop up from 3 yards out with an open goal. So I love that. Like from an FPL perspective, I don't want my forwards doing loads of fancy work deep in their own box. I want them getting as close to the opposition goal as possible. So yeah, we'll start with Mateta. Really nice fixtures coming up. West Ham, Brentford, United, Everton, Fulham. Very happy to have him for those 5 games there. And I'm hopeful that Graham Potter's defence isn't too watertight for this game and that Palace can at least get a few opportunities. But yeah, looking forward to owning Mateta for the foreseeable future. And again, because he's not necessarily hauled, like Mateta's not gone and got like a 15-point or anything like that, not many people are still transferring him in. So I'm just getting a really lowly owned asset that I believe in that could do pretty well. And because, again, of his tricky price point, lots of people aren't really looking at him. So I just get to maintain a fairly lowly owned Mateta, which feels really nice. Isak, exceptional. The shame now with Isak is that unless you captain him, you're not gaining anything from Isak. I think I lost like 1% of Isak's points, which basically means because so many people owned him and quite a few captained him, not only am I gaining nothing from Isak, I'm actually losing a small amount. It's the same with Palmer, by the way. Every single week that you don't captain Palmer, when he returns, you're losing points even when you own him because so many people also captain him. So with Palmer, Isak and Salah, assuming you captain Salah and then own Palmer and Isak, the 3 of them are basically irrelevant in FPL. And it's a shame because owning Isak is so much fun, but he's just too good to not own. And I feel like if you don't own him at this point, even with the fixtures coming up, it feels almost a bit silly to go without. And I would normally say, oh, don't chase the points, maybe go against him with the fit. He doesn't show any sign of slowing down. And Newcastle, and this is the big thing, Newcastle are playing so well, not just Isak. And when the team is functioning to that level, and you've got such an exceptional number 9 in Isak, he's going to finish the chances he gets. Is he a captaincy option? Absolutely. He's playing at home. Bournemouth have obviously conceded chances recently. They are a better defence themselves at home, so this is away for them. It's a little bit more difficult. And yeah, Newcastle are just flying. Could I see Newcastle winning 3-0 again? Of course I could. So yeah, I think he's a decent shout. I'll be going for Salah or Palmer though, because I think this week they are just marginally better assets. And then there's Chris Wood. Lots of people asking about Chris Wood captaincy. It's not for me. And the reason it's not for me is because Chris Wood very rarely gets multiple chances in a given game. When was the last time you watched a Nottingham Forest game and thought Chris Wood had like 3 big chances? It doesn't happen. He gets 1 big chance a game and he finishes it. Sometimes he doesn't even get 1 and he still finishes it. I just don't see, and I hope I'm proved wrong because I would love a hat-trick from him. I don't see him going out there and getting a hat-trick against Southampton. That's just my personal opinion on it. But the fixture is there. Do I think he'll return? I hope so, but not enough to trust him with the armband. The thing is with Chris Wood, for those of you that are maybe looking to bring him in and want to own him, the Southampton game is great, but then it's Bournemouth, Brighton, Fulham, Newcastle. They're not great fixtures, and I think even after that, they're not fixtures that would be enough to put me off, but they're certainly not like that enticing. The only one positive for Chris Wood is his game week 29 fixture is really good, which is a blank game week, and you'd be pretty happy owning him. So after those, so it's Bournemouth, Brighton, Fulham, Newcastle, Arsenal, City, and then it's Ipswich. So I kind of like just holding him through these fixtures because if Forest score, and by the way, I really need to stop underrating Forest as a team. They're really, really good. If they score in these games, which they probably will, it's probably going to be Chris Wood getting a fair amount of them. And then you've got a really nice player for blank game week 29. I guess unless we see a notable drop-off from Chris Wood and from Nottingham Forest, I'll probably keep him for the foreseeable future. I think the point that I might look to sell him would be that Newcastle game. Ahead of Newcastle, Arsenal, City, that little run of 3. If he doesn't do particularly well over the next 4, then that's the option. But I don't need to sit here talking about selling Chris Wood because he's been so good for me since I brought him in. 2 goals in 2 games, and they weren't even the games that I brought him in for. I brought him in mainly for the Southampton one, and he's gone and got a goal against Wolves and Liverpool too. So yeah, there's the team. In terms of players that I am very, very happy with, no chance of moving on, I'll actually say Vandenberg because he's just cheap. Rodgers, Munoz, Mateta, Isak, Wood, Salah, Palmer, Robinson, And then that's probably it. So those, in terms of players that I am keeping an eye on, let's say, Sanchez, keeping an eye on, might move him on in the future, but just not quite yet. Gabriel and Trent, for their price, I need to keep an eye on them. And then it's really Enzo and Bruno. Because the midfielders are so good in FPL, I'm not going to sell Rodgers, Palmer, Salah. Those are the two that have to make way. And when I look at that combo between Enzo and Rodgers, before we move on to my watch list, Enzo and Fernandes, I should say, is a little bit mispriced. And what I'm like, they're not very well balanced, those price points. You've got Fernandes at 8.3, I think he is, and Enzo at 5. If I got Fernandes down to, let's say, even someone like Gordon, a little bit cheaper, you can get Enzo up with my money in the bank to someone like an Eberechi Eze. I'm not saying I want Gordon and Eze, but you would say that's probably a better combination than Fernandes and Enzo. So I have that possibility moving forward to just pull a bit of money out of Fernandes, even Fernandes to Mbermo, and then that gives you a little bit more money to use with that Enzo position. Remember, I do have 1.5 in the bank. I do have the 2 free transfers. But as of right now, as boring as it is, I can't really justify a transfer as things stand because I've already got a bit of a benching headache. The squad looks pretty good. As of right now, I don't have any injured players, flags, worries like that. So I'm probably going to try and roll the transfer. But let's still discuss my watch list and the players that I'm looking at for future game weeks. So guys, as I said, I'm not really planning right now to use a transfer for game week 22 because I don't feel like my team desperately needs it. And I do want to get to a position of strength coming up with the double game week for Liverpool and Everton in 24, with a possible double for Spurs and Fulham in 25, although that's still not even confirmed, let alone that likely. And then obviously the assistant manager chip does become available if I want to use that. I just feel like, and also blank game week 29, there are just so many things coming up where free transfers are going to be so incredibly valuable that I'd like to get to a position of strength if I can. But there is definitely some upside to attack in the coming game weeks. So let's assume that I do possibly roll a transfer in game week 22. The idea for game week 23 is to maybe bring in my third Liverpool asset, because obviously they've got Ipswich at home, followed by the double game week of Bournemouth and Everton away. Then it's Wolves at home in game week 25. That is an exceptional 4 fixtures for Liverpool. They are still the best team in the league. And as a result, I'd quite like a third asset. Now, I've got 2 ways that I can go with this. One is to bring in Diogo Jota. I would ideally like to do that for Enzo Fernandes. But in order to do it for Enzo Fernandes, I need to somehow free up 0.7 million. And when I look at my team, there's really no obvious place to free up 0.7 unless I downgrade Robinson all the way to fodder. I can't even get him to Castagna, all the way to like a 4 million defender. And then is that worth it to just get in Jota, who might potentially not start both in the double? And I would say probably won't start both in the double. Now, do you need him to? No. His upside is incredibly high. The reason that Jota's on here, and you might be surprised because I've been saying Jota's a non-option. I watched when Jota came on recently in game week 21. He was comfortably the best player on the pitch. Like, he made all of the other Liverpool attackers look sluggish. And I know he's come on with fresh legs, but grabs the goal immediately. And just his on-the-ball work was exceptional. We knew that when Jota was fit, he was first choice under Arne Slot as well. He recently said that Jota is now available to play and start and get 90 minutes. I just feel like this could be a really decent entry point for Jota in game week 23. My concern is, if you bring him in for 23 and he does start the Ipswich game, great. But then you're like, well, he's definitely not starting both in the double. If he doesn't start Ipswich, you've missed one of the better fixtures. And then even so, you're like, well, maybe he starts Bournemouth, starts Spurs, and then doesn't start Everton. Remember that for the Liverpool double, they have the Spurs game and then the Plymouth Argyle game, I think it is, in between the 2 games in the double. There might be enough to put me off going for a Liverpool asset in terms of the way that the fixture schedule is looking, which leaves me with then Konate as an option. This works a lot more in terms of my overall structure. I could just do something like Robinson to Konate in game week 23. So in game week 23, Robinson's fixtures start to turn a little bit. So he's got from 23 and beyond, Man United, Newcastle, Forest, Crystal Palace, Wolves, Brighton, Spurs, Arsenal, Liverpool, Bournemouth, Chelsea. There aren't many banker fixtures in there that you'd expect that much. But then I'm selling a player that has got a ridiculous number. Is it like 9 assists he's got? Yeah, 9 assists in the Premier League. Seems a bit crazy. It seems a transfer that I might regret. I mean, I sold Robinson already at the start of the season, and I've already brought him back in. So, but then I'm sat there like, well, does that mean I just don't own a Liverpool asset? I suppose I could do Sanchez to Alisson. But basically, in game week 23, the idea is that if I am going to have 3 Liverpool players for their double, you do it in game week 23 because you also want the Ipswich at home game. And that would be my advice to you as well. So that's something to assess ahead of the next game week. And then the other player that I've listed is Solanke, because he's got Leicester in 23. And he's doing the job, right, recently. He's got a couple more returns. He's just looking a little bit closer to goal. He picks up, obviously, 3 bonus points in 20. He did score an own goal, I'm aware, in Game Week 21, and that's made him a bit of a laughing stock. But, yeah, from 23 and beyond, Leicester, Brentford, United, Ipswich. Those are 4 games I'd love to own Solanke for. The issue with bringing in Solanke in 23 is I don't want to sell any of my forwards. So unless I get an injury to Wood, Mateta, or Isak, I probably won't be going out there and buying Solanke. The idea in Game Week 24, let's say that I've already brought in my Liverpool assets and maybe I do have further free transfers, is I think it's a really nice entry point for the Brentford assets. So if we look at their fixtures, they've got in 24 and beyond, Spurs, West Ham, Leicester, Everton, Villa, Bournemouth, Newcastle. The other good thing is they obviously play in blank Game Week 29, so you can rely on them for that game week. So I am eyeing up in Burmo and Wissa. Again, the issue with Wissa is I kind of like my forward line. So it's more likely to be in Burmo, and it probably would be for Bruno Fernandes. The issue with selling Bruno Fernandes in Game Week 24 is, as you can see, Ahmad enters my watch list in that week because Manchester United go on a really nice run of fixtures. So I suppose I could pivot away from Bruno to Mbeumo, and if I do want to own a Man United asset, maybe I bring in Ahmad for Enzo. That's a possibility, potentially. But then is that a waste of transfers? So for 24 and beyond for Manchester United, it's Palace, Spurs, Everton, Ipswich. It is Arsenal, but then they play against Leicester in blank Game Week 29. So these will be the things. Obviously, so much could happen that could change our opinions here. But I do like the idea of Liverpool entry point in 23 and then Brentford in 24 with Solanke and Ahmad as other options. In 25, you might laugh at me, but Semenyo and Kluivert enter the possibility of coming in because I'm a fixtures-based manager. I will always try and target the fixtures wherever I can. And in 25, they play Southampton. It's then Wolves, Brighton, Spurs. It's then Brentford at home in blank Game Week 29, which is a decent fixture. Then Ipswich, West Ham, Fulham, Palace, United. They've got a good run of fixtures till about Game Week 34. So if I need a cheap asset, let's say I've gone off Enzo or I need to downgrade Bruno, a Semenyo or a Kluivert around Game Week 25 is a possibility. Don't laugh. Semenyo is probably going to go on a really nice run now that everyone's sold him. And then the only other player is Cunha. I loved owning Cunha. Cunha has probably been my favourite asset to own this. In fact, hands down, he's been my favourite asset to own this season. And I want him back, ideally. And I think Wolves have looked pretty decent under Vitor Pereira. In 25, they play Liverpool. So that's probably not the best entry point. But from there and beyond, he's got Bournemouth, Fulham, Everton, Southampton in blank Game Week 29, West Ham, Ipswich, Spurs, United, Leicester. Right. In fact, even then Brighton, Palace and Brentford to end the season. Wolves pretty much from Game Week 26 and beyond have the best fixture run in the Premier League. So if Cunha is still looking okay at that point, and let's say still getting returns, we think he's on penalties, he will enter my thinking, again, if I do need a forward. So I guess what I'm saying right now is the plan is to probably roll the transfer in Game Week 22, very boring, but then go into Game Week 23 with 3 free transfers, probably bring in my third Liverpool asset, and then probably leave it there. Which means going into 24, I'd still have the three free transfers. Maybe look to bring in Burmo, and then maybe start to target some fixtures from 25 and beyond, and also start to plan a little bit more for blank Game Week 29. So if I go back to my team, I'm pretty certain this will be the 15 that I rock into Game Week 22 with. The only question marks are, who do we captain, and who do I bench? So I'd love to know. At the moment, I'm captaining Salah. At the moment, I'm benching Munoz, but I definitely don't like it. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 22 team selection with a bit of rambling at the end about my future plans and players that I'm looking at across the upcoming game weeks. If you did enjoy this video, please do smash that like button and make sure to subscribe. I really do appreciate it. Trying to hit 150,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I can only do that with your help. This is a double upload day, so there will be an upload later today, so do check that out. Deadline stream tomorrow, but until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.